Hello, everyone. My name is Julianne Meyer. I am the host of Own Your Wellness, and I'm excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. I have an amazing guest. She and I speak the same language, and I'm excited to pick her brain because she knows so many things that can help everyone who is watching today. Her name is Christin Collins. Let's bring her on.
Hi,
Julianne. So excited to have you here today. How are you?
I'm wonderful, and I'm so appreciative of your work and your vibrancy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm so excited. As I said, I've been looking forward to this conversation because I've had a chance to take a look at your book. I'm excited to read it. I'm excited for you to share your knowledge, your wisdom, your joy, your exuberance with the audience. So I would love to ask, first of all, if you wouldn't mind telling a little bit about yourself and your own wellness journey.
Oh, thank you. And I'll just cut right to the chase. I was an executive overseeing health and wellness for a very large healthcare system. And I was a vegan triathlete, thinking I was doing everything right, and found out after some blood work that I actually had chronic acute inflammation, which, needless to say, confused me greatly because, again, I was a vegan triathlete that had oversight of health and wellness. What was I doing wrong? And that was the beginning of my journey.
That's pretty amazing because, when I think of triathletes and, vegans, I think super healthy. So were there symptoms that led you to realize maybe, hey, there's something wrong? Because for me, I would think I'm healthy. I must be imagining this.
So it's interesting, and I am curious if this speaks to your audience. I had, in hindsight, I realized I had become accustomed to a new normal. So now I can tell you I had symptoms, but then I felt, oh, I'm just normal. I'm aging a little bit, so I started making excuses for, so I've put on a little weight, or, oh, my stomach inflates every afternoon, or, oh, I'm really tired. I assumed those were just part of life. So I didn't know my symptoms were actually showing me I was doing something wrong.
Isn't that fascinating? Because I know for me, I have suffered from the same exact symptoms. And it took me so long to realize, wait a second. I'm doing this. This isn't normal. Just like you said. So I am 100% sure that the audience can, at least some people can relate to exactly what you're talking about. So what has that, obviously you've overcome some physical symptoms and things like that. So how did your life change? Like, what kind of changes did you make?
It was quite a journey, to be really transparent. I couldn't find the answers. I couldn't find the playbook. And I don't know that for anyone there is one playbook that you can just copy someone else's. So it was kind of this unfolding of aha moments. You said something just now that I actually didn't learn until about 5 years ago. I didn't understand that I actually owned my own health. I didn't understand that, never mind how I feel my body, how I move my body are two key components, like we've already mentioned. But I had no idea that how I thought or how I showed up in this world actually affected my health. So my book is actually a compilation of stories where I had these pops of awareness where I was like, wow, I'm doing this to myself. It's no one else's responsibility. It's only my responsibility. And it was quite a journey to unfold.
I love that you said that because we get so used to the idea of they did it this way, that's how I'm going to do it too. And, we're bio individuals and we all have our own things. And something else that I really love about you that you talk about, and it's that, the thoughts that you think and the words that you use and how you treat yourself will determine how healthy you are. And I've got to say, most people never figure that out. So I am so glad you're here to, spread that message because, if beating myself up would make me more wealthy and healthy, then I would be the most fabulous person in the entire world by now. So
we'd be retired, you and I. I think a lot of folks that I connect with, it's that we are the hardest on self, right? And one of my ahas was realizing I only liked myself if I was being of service. So that's a whole conversation, and we could dive really deep into. But if you think about that for a moment, I didn't like myself when I was just breathing or being.
Yeah.
I had to earn my own love through service. So I question to community, are you okay being you in just the stillness of the present? And then from that place of wholeness, we can show up in community and be of service, but not projecting or judging or needing anything from the experience. We just are simply being of service without any, backhanded deals needing to go on.
I appreciate what you're saying so much, because being of service in itself is not a bad thing. We tend, like being a triathlete is not, these are all positive qualities and things, but when you take it as a way to earn your own love, then it becomes something that is unhealthy. And I love that, you're making this aware, because so many women in particular, oh my goodness, we just forget about ourselves, first of all, and put ourselves last most of the time, especially if you have kids, because then all of a sudden they're number one. And then it's kind of like you're an afterthought. As long as you're taking care of everything else, then all of a sudden you're worthy of some sort of attention and love. But then it's like, I don't even have time for myself. So
it's a big circle, right?
Exactly.
It's this cycle. And I literally had exhausted myself, and it was being of will, to get things done. And many of us are very strong-minded and go-getters, and we get it done. But I spent so much time like swimming upstream instead of being in flow. And now with this new realization, and what else I found really interesting, and again, this is in reflection, this is on contemplation, that joy, that satiation, that wholeness that I was searching for outside of self is actually my desire to be connected to self and being comfortable with self. So whether it was the new shoes or that new board I was going to sit on, or, whatever accomplishment it was, that temporary high of achievement, right? Well, that constant joy is already within, and then we can show up in our lives. And I love your promo leading into this, right? Show up and have that joyful life and be in touch with your soul. And that's exactly what my lesson was.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it's so beautifully said too. And you said a lot of information in there. And I'd really love to touch on, obviously everybody's process is going to be slightly different, but how were you able to recognize and have this epiphany? Did it come as an epiphany that like you needed to just be, and that was plenty, that was enough, that, because it's something as women and men, we hear a lot, but it's like, how do we accomplish that? How do we go from,
from crazy, successful go-getter to being? I hear you. I would love to say it was an epiphany and then all of a sudden the light switch was here and everything was different. That is not true. And I think that's, kind of what this pandemic has taught us. If, my learnings were before the pandemic, which is interesting because now during the pandemic, I've been able to speak on this, with a little bit of experience. Whereas now there are lots of people who are just like, I want to go. And I'm like, no. Right now it's about being. And if you don't have clarity on next step, right? Because we want to do that next thing so we can get some semblance of comfort, or maybe that release again where we'll find that joy. And I have spent most of this year sitting in the discomfort of the unknown and having to get really comfortable. Like, I don't know. I don't have clarity. So discovering, and it's cute, I'll show you a tagline that blossomed for me. I don't know if you could see it.
Oh yeah.
Is 2 complete sentences: be, period, love, period. So when that, I kind of felt that blossoming in my head, I didn't know what that meant. It just felt right. You know what I mean? And so a lot of my epiphanies they start as just these awarenesses that come when being still. And I giggle because I'm like, what the heck does that mean, to be love? And I'm like, oh my God, now it's like all I can think about is it's very simple. You just have to be, because we are love. And that's the end of the story. Everything else is just, a degree off in some capacity.
Oh, that is so well said. And, it's simple. It might not be easy, but it's definitely simple. And so my question, I guess, would be, even though, at least for me, my experience has been, I might have these amazing epiphanies, but that doesn't mean that I automatically change overnight. And I still have a lot of the same behaviors, the same thoughts. And do you have something that you do to help yourself walk through that instead of saying, oh my gosh, I know better?
Yeah. And I have a bunch of different things that I do when I find myself in an old default, right? Because we're just on a journey, we're not sprinting to the destination. So a couple things, first and foremost, and I think most importantly, I forgive myself. I don't beat myself up. I'm not like, better. And I actually start giggling. I do a weekly YouTube of just whatever's happening that week in my little head. And I laugh because I'm like, I'm having to take my own medicine this week because I'm out there and I'm kind of judging, different people. And I talk all about you shouldn't judge. So it's a journey. And so one thing I do is forgive myself and kind of laugh and be like, yeah, if you were perfect, you probably wouldn't be here. The second thing is I am very blessed with an intimate community of, I'll call it accountability partners, but not, it's just people who care and that I can be, 100% authentic and transparent. And they help me. They're like, hey, are you judging someone right now? And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. So I think it's wonderful to have either one or a handful of really, key people in your life, because we are the compilation of, 5 of the closest people in your life, so I think that's really important too. And then the third thing, in order to try to not default into old habits, is a daily practice of self-care. And every day looks different. Some days it's a slam dunk and it's minutes, and other, days I'm blessed that it can be an hour and a half. Some days it's walking the dog in nature. Some days it's a 30-minute meditation. It varies every day, but there's a commitment every day to doing something for myself.
I think that that's really important, because people tend to think of things as, self-love or self-care to be like going and getting pampered. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with, getting your nails done or whatever the case.
I love me a good nanny.
Amen. I'm just saying though that, self-care is also eating healthy foods as opposed to, fast food, for example, or, movement, as opposed to sitting on the couch all day, whatever the case may be for you. I love that it looks different for you every day. So there isn't one right way to do it.
No. And, you and I both said we don't own the playbook. There are some days that maybe getting that nanny isn't the best thing for self-care because maybe finances are tight at the moment and it doesn't make sense to go spend money on that. And are you okay, not being as groomed as you normally like? So it does vary every single day and it shows up in different ways.
I like that example too, because can you sit with that? Can you be uncomfortable with that if it's not exactly the way you think it should be in that particular moment?
Right?
Yeah, I think that is so important. Are there any self-care things that you do that are just non-negotiable?
For the most part, taking at least a few minutes a day to just be and breathe. And I do love it if I can have a routine in the morning of taking the dog out for a walk, going to the gym for 30 minutes, and then meditating for 10 to 20. That's optimal. That's it's not 50% of the time. That's just not what life is. But the non-negotiable is if it's a day where I don't have time in the morning to take care of myself, it's either before I jump out of bed or when I go to bed that night, I consciously take a few deep breaths and I contemplate what it is I'm grateful for in that moment. So an expression and a practice of gratitude daily when I don't have deeper time is a non-negotiable.
I love that. And that is, laws of the universe. Laws of the universe right there. What you focus on expands, first of all. So if you're grateful, then you get more of what you're grateful for. So I love that so much because it's something that seems so simple, but it's almost like people don't believe it. It's just, what harm is it to think about things that make you happy?
Well, and when you set yourself up in the morning, with that practice where I'm kind of waking up and I'm like, okay, what is it I'm grateful for? Then the rest of your day is foundationally set on a lens of gratitude. Conversely, if it's something that I didn't have time to do all day, but now I'm going to bed, and nobody just lays their head down and falls asleep all immediately. Everyone has a minute to reflect and think of things they're grateful for. Sleep and that restoration and that connection to subconscious. What a beautiful way to be able to set up your sleep for that regeneration and that interconnectivity is through that lens of gratitude.
You are speaking my language. That is so true. Oh my goodness. That's why it's so important not to watch TV before bed. That's why it's so important to, like, your last thoughts are what you're going to be thinking about all night. And is that really how you want to wake up in the morning? So
no, and think about like why we're a globe right now of of anxiety and trauma with all of this information. That is a tool that I love sharing. Is I want to be educated on what's going on in the world. I don't want to be Pollyanna. We're here to live in this world and be of this world. It'd be really cool if we could all go climb a mountain and, eat granola and not take a shower ever. It'd be great. But we're here to be among, a part of this world. So yet once I'm educated, it's like, okay, what am I in control of in this scenario, which is almost always nothing except myself. How I'm showing up, how I'm taking care of me, if I'm being the best me I can be. And then, I'm educated, I got what's going on. I'm going to now unplug and go ahead and breathe or read a book that is inspiring or, doing something else, not allowing myself to spin with this negative news cycle.
I think that that's a beautiful thing to talk about because especially right now, I mean, the last year basically has been kind of insane. And I have people in my life that really get stuck in that spiral of negativity without even realizing that there's another option. So I'm curious, what are some things that you do when you start to notice, wait a second, I don't need to be thinking these thoughts. I can switch, how I'm feeling by changing either my environment or my thoughts. What are some things that you do if you happen to notice yourself going down a path that maybe isn't the best one for you?
So I'm laughing because I've been like, it's not a light switch. It's not a light switch. It's not a light switch. This lesson was a light switch. And it shocked my system. So I was so embarrassed that I'm pretty good at this one. I was with a beautiful colleague out of state on a business trip. And I was so excited to have this quality time with this woman who was a mentor, a friend, a guide. And I was in the backseat of a cab and I'm just going to town about my opinion of this other woman in our community. And clearly everything she does wrong and how she shows up and just how dare she. And this woman that I was with, who's my friend, just looked at me so lovingly. And she's like, yeah, let it go. Why are you worried about her? And just, you're attracting all this negative energy because of your negative output. It was like, the sledgehammer on my head and she wasn't trying to humiliate me. I was just really embarrassed. So I still default sometimes into judgment or negativity, but for the most part, like you said earlier, I attract the energy and the vibration I put out.
Yes.
And I also have learned on my journey that for every human that's breathing, there is a degree of difference in their vision of truth on the same exact scenario, right? We all come to the reality of the moment with a slightly or grossly different lens or set of life experiences, beliefs. So we want to embrace that we're all going to see the same thing different. And so when I'm in a negative space, I simply say, how do I want to look at this different? Is there another way to look at this that I can turn this into a positive? So mindset and how I'm showing up in the world and how I'm approaching a situation is on me. That's on me. That's not on her. That's not on you. That's not on my boss. That's not on my husband. That's on me.
And, I love that you talk about that because most people are like, yeah, but I'd be happy if they were different, or I'd be happy if this situation was different. I'd be more blah if this was less. And, and I'd be a liar and a hypocrite if I didn't say that I have been part of that, that process myself 100%. But it's also very empowering to think of the fact that you get to choose.
Well, and then to take it even like another step, if you really can be open to growth, I have to say to myself, why is the situation happening?
Yeah.
Why did I attract this? What's going on? Is this a lesson for me? Or am I holding space for them to have a lesson? Am I going to react and go crazy and, rent out a billboard and say what a jerk that person is? Or am I going to stay neutral and speak my truth, right? Calmly, lovingly. And then, it is what it is. Just leave that in the air and, not worry about it. But I think how we react to a negative situation, there's always a lesson. And take the time so I don't have to attract that one again. I learn a lesson in real time.
I love that. And I always think too, when people say to me, yeah, but I can't control the way I feel, or, it's so hard. And I always love to use the example of, well, if you won $1 million in the lottery, would you really care if the clerk was in a bad mood when they were checking you out? Would you really care? No, you wouldn't. So really,
and what you said is really important, because it's not about denying how you feel. Right? It's exactly. All of a sudden, like I broke out in a hot sweat and I'm flush and I'm whatever you're feeling. I'm sad, I'm hurt, I'm scared, or even the joy side too, right? We are here to feel. We are here to experience all of the different emotions that are possible on this planet. So with that being said, we feel that emotion in real time and we let that thing hit. We let that thing roll through our body, and then we inhale it and we release it, and it might still be there, right? And then it might take me 4 days to get over it. But the more that I practice that with not denying the experience or stuffing the experience, but just feeling the emotion and then releasing it, I have found that now I've kind of got a regiment of workout that it's so much easier for me to get really upset for a minute, and then 20 minutes later be like, oh, thank God I didn't overreact to that. Right?
Exactly. No, that is such an important point too, is to actually just feel it and let it go. And something you said that I really want to touch on is that, when you were talking about feeling your feelings, you were talking also about how you could literally feel it in your body. So, the sweats, the hot, you can literally feel your emotions in your body. So imagine what that's doing to you. Now, that's not to say, that you should sit there and judge yourself one way or the other, but just be aware that, wow, I practice because I used to have a huge problem with anger, and I would just get mad at every little thing, and it was everybody else's fault. But as soon as I started noticing that and it didn't serve me, it was amazing. I was like, I could start laughing at those thoughts that came up, and just, I might feel it, but I could laugh at it and be like, okay, you're being silly.
So you had a workout, right? You had a little bit of a journey and a regiment that trained you to get there. And so I was one that needed and wanted desperately to control my surroundings and my outcomes. If we've learned anything in the past 18 months, there are no guarantees. There's very little we control, and it's, how we show up in all the different, scenarios that for the most part, a lot of them, we don't even have responsibility or control over. So feeling that emotion in real time, feeling helpless, feeling scared, feeling frustrated, right? But the more that we deny the feeling, that's where my illness, trying to control, and I was denying, that's where my illness manifested in my autoimmune system.
Yeah, that is absolutely fascinating to me. And, I know for me, I can always tell when I'm not, like, something's going on with me mentally and emotionally, because all of a sudden things start happening, like with my skin, for example, or I'm just like, oh my gosh, okay, it's time to take a look at what's going on.
Well, and to your point, when we are centered and when we are, we are experiencing self-love, a lot of our decisions that we default to become super easy.
Yeah.
Right. You're not having to will your way through. I'm not going to eat the, Snickers bar, which is delicious. I'm going to go ahead and eat, my body's actually craving greens and, whatever. So that internal self-care then also shows up in all the other facets of well-being, where we tend, not always, but we tend to make better decisions for ourselves, maybe I'm not going to have that third glass of wine on Tuesday, because I do feel good and I want to get a good night's sleep. And instead of it being like this whole mind game of I cannot, because who wants to be told you cannot?
Exactly. I know that the little child in me is like, oh, really?
I deserve.
Yeah. Let me show you. Oh, that's amazing. No, that was my favorite. I deserve this. I deserve that glass of wine. That was definitely my slogan for years.
And it's like, I deserve. Yeah. And it's like, instead, one is wonderful or none tonight is wonderful. And then enjoying when you are versus getting that satiation and wholeness from the distraction of the activity or the consumption.
Yes. Exactly. When it becomes a need, like then it's an emotional need that you're trying to fulfill instead of enjoying the taste or, food, alcohol, whatever the case may be. It's maybe now it's time to take a look at that because it's turning into something that's not food.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I love that. We do have to go to a commercial break already. Can you believe it?
No,
it goes so quick, right? All right. We'll be right back after these messages. Just give me 1 second. Oh, I don't even want to go to commercial. This is absolutely amazing. And I just want to say though, before we go, thank you to everybody who's watching us live. You are always appreciated. And as I mentioned, we'll be right back after these messages.
Now, you can vibrationally align your aura. You can gain a larger and spiritual perspective on life, relationships, God, people, wellness, and money. You can also have moments of meditation and reflection any time of the day. And reading the thrilling, adventurous, and mystical story of Shiga will just add more faith to your daily experience of the mystery of the universe.
When drug or alcohol addiction take over, things begin to disappear. Your friends, your family, and eventually, you. Recommended by Dr. Phil, New Method Wellness can help get your life back with individualized treatment plans for dual diagnosis clients. New Method Wellness provides the most highly credentialed treatment in a safe and welcome environment. Call New Method Wellness for your free consultation and ask about our national accreditations. Together, we can put the pieces back together.
As human beings, we are meant to thrive in an environment where true love is shared, where we are welcome just as we are, a space we connect with others with the single purpose to find God as love within, a place we learn to raise our consciousness and vibration for happiness, wellness, and wealth creation. Transformative, an online spiritual gathering for everyone. This invitation is sent to you by www.livingfaithschool.org.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Julianne Meyer, and I'm the host of Own Your Wellness. And today's special guest is Christin Collins, who disappeared. So apparently, I am just seeing this now. This is fascinating. Let's hopefully she comes back in just a moment. Let me see. We can go to another commercial, and we'll be right back after this message. Well, this has never happened before. I've never had a guest fall off in the middle of a broadcast. So unfortunately, I guess maybe I have no idea what to say except that she is gone, unfortunately. And I was so looking forward to the rest of our conversation. But before we go, I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to reach out to her. Her name is Christin Collins, and she wrote Her Phoenix Rising, which is a fabulous book about her own experiences. And she is back. So yay. Thank goodness. I was hoping.
Let me tell you something, okay? That was so interesting. All of a sudden, it disappeared. And a little secret for all of us, technology is not my jam. And I was like, oh no, oh my gosh. So I'm really proud that I stayed calm and I figured it out.
Me too, because I was like, oh no, what am I going to do? And then I was thinking, okay, I'll go to commercial. And I was like, she's not back yet. Okay, wait a second. Let's just talk about her website and her book. So.
Well, thank you for that. And I apologize. That was a total test. The universe completely, because it's not storming. That should not have happened. Your commercials are so wonderful.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, let's talk about your book. Can people actually reach out for your book on your website as well? Or I'd love for you to just share with everybody about that.
Sure, be happy to. Yeah, my book can be obtained through my website and or Amazon. And the book was so interesting, and it's just really a testimony to a wellness journey using the tool of journaling.
I love that.
And I know that I am 100% sure you speak to and encourage folks to reflect, release, right, through the art of journaling. And so when I found myself deciding to exit my healthcare career, and my husband's like, what are you going to go do? I'm like, I have no idea. But I was lucky to get accepted to do this project out of Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., which was a 5-month book writing experience. Oh, so wow. It was never like, I'm going to write a book and this is what it's going to be about. It was the opposite. It was, I'm going to commit to spending 5 months just downloading whatever came up. So it was really funny because so there's no pressure like, oh, you have to write a book, because that would be hard for me. So what was interesting was the stories that appeared, the stories that came up. I was like, oh, I didn't know that was such a big deal. Or it's so interesting that that's something I thought of, or that person, is crossing. I haven't talked to them in 10 years. And that was I only met them for an hour. You know what I'm saying? So my book ended up being, in hindsight, a compilation of stories that when I read them, they beautifully themed a thread of lessons that brought me to halfway through life, I hope. And the underlying reason for writing it wasn't, again, like we already talked about, I don't have the answers. Okay. We all have our own answers inside of us.
Exactly.
Right. So for me, it's find it within yourself. That's the tagline of my company. What we're looking for outside is in here. And we all have a unique why and a unique purpose and a unique journey. So my hope in sharing my stories was that awkward authenticity of like, yeah, at times it was ugly and embarrassing and uncomfortable or traumatic. So whatever your journey is, right, go ahead and own it and sit with it and then release it. Because I found in healthcare, at least in my health journey, we were never getting to root cause. What I kept asking different people throughout my lifetime when I'd have an issue, I'm like, why? Why did that happen? And, you know, I had ovarian cancer when I was 21 years old, which is unheard of. And especially to find it, which is, that's in my book. And I asked the doctor when I woke up, and they told me, you know, you had ovarian cancer. We just took your ovaries out. And I'm like, what? And I said, why did I get it? And she said, Kristen, if we knew that, I'd be a billionaire. Like, I don't know why. So my passion and the reason I shared my stories in my book is that to get to your root cause by no longer distracting self from some of those things that we might not want to deal with or address or do the healing work. I had thought I had done my healing work, and I found out that I had just gotten really, really good at dissociating from it. And so now that I've shared my journey, my hope is to inspire that awakening, inspire that awareness in others, so they can go on their path to root cause and just really being comfortable in their own skin.
You know, it's so beautiful that you've done this, because like you said, it's, you know, we all have our own answers within us, but to see and witness somebody else go through their own journey is inspiring. It's like, oh, maybe I can do it too.
The hardest thing to see is in self, right?
Yes.
It's because you're so immersed in it. It's not like, oh, where someone from the outside can just come in and be like, hi, you know, try this, check this out. Yeah. So having folks, friends, community, like your community, to hold space, your work as you coach people through to create their own plan.
Exactly.
You support their plan. And what was interesting is I almost started writing in a different format with a publisher. And in hindsight, if I had done that, I would have given all of the credit and all of the accolades of this of the journey. I would have given it to the publisher. I'd have been like, "Oh, it's only because of you." Like this was a raw, uncomfortable 5 months, and now I can exhale and be like, "Wow, you had the discipline, you had the self-love to actually do that healing work and do that reflection and release it and actually finally heal."
Wow. I don't mean to take us off track, but I just want to mention to those who are watching, the link to your book is in the chat, as well as a 20% off discount just for watching the show. So make sure that you check that out. It's in the chat. And for those who are watching on TV, check out YouTube. It's there. Facebook, it's there. You definitely want to get that discount and get the book, because it'll change your life. So, So, sometimes it's hard to own our own stuff. And I love that you have come to a place where you realize that, yes, I need to do that. Did you notice that when you started to love yourself more, that your health issues started to change as well? Or what was your experience?
Yeah, it was kind of funny, because you're like, again, when I was watching your commercials, and we talked about it before the commercial break, I default into, not always, not perfectly, but more often than not, into some different choices, because I'm not trying to either self-sabotage in a subconscious way, or get that sugar high, or get that, whatever, that dopamine release from buying a bunch of stuff online. I'm much calmer because I'm more centered and whole. And how that showed up physically for me, I sleep like a rock. I sleep great. I make better choices. I'm more joyful. I'm calmer. I'm a better listener. I just, my health overall, my relationships overall, what I'm attracting. Oh my goodness. Meeting you, the opportunities that are just crossing now. I giggle. I'm like, this is so awesome. And it's all because of that, that centeredness and that wholeness. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, was to be okay with loving myself. It was very awkward.
You know, that's a really good point. It is very awkward. It seems like something that should come naturally, although it doesn't for, I would say, 99% of the people like on the planet. Because at least in the United States, we're not taught to. We're not, I mean, we're taught things like calculus, but we're not taught how to love ourselves. We're not taught how to meditate. We're not taught how to be present. We're, you know, these are things that, you know, really help us in the quality of our life. And I just love that you mentioned that because, you know, we think that it should be easy somehow or not uncomfortable or it shouldn't feel odd, but anything new that we're not used to isn't going to feel comfortable. Think about when you first started driving. It wasn't comfortable. You know?
Yeah, and that just bubbled up for me. You know, it's hard to love ourselves. Well, gee, I wonder why. Because if, you know, growing up, if you showed up any way different, right? We were this society of ants marching. You know, this is normal. This is what's cool. If you had a different thought, or you dressed a different way, or you made a mistake, and you know, just that it's people are hard on people. And if we could embrace and celebrate our uniqueness. So I'm not thinking, I don't live in, you know, la la utopia land where overnight we're all just going to sing kumbaya with all of our degrees of differences. But I think, you know, I've gotten comfortable with my differences. I don't necessarily, I don't flaunt them. I don't, you know, it's not how I lead into a room or into a convo, but I'm also going to be okay that that's not how I see it, or that's not what I feel, or that's not what I like, or that's not what I want to express. So I hope that stirs something inside of community to be like, when someone shows up and they're different than self, you know, hey, they have every right to be who they are. I can only be who I am. And I think if we all showed up that way, our health would all be, and our health, our, you know, global warming, I mean, a lot of things would be a lot better.
No, that's a really good point too. You know, and I think too, when you're more accepting of yourself, you tend to be more accepting of other people being themselves as well. At least that's sort of been my experience and things that I've noticed. So speaking of community, what would you say to somebody who maybe doesn't have the best set of, you know, maybe co-workers? And, you know, because something that you touched on was that, you know, we become like the people that we're around, like the 5 people that we're around. Sometimes we can't change some of those people. So what would you recommend to somebody who maybe can't change certain people in their lives at that particular moment in time?
Such a great question. And there's definitely a difference between you're in a traumatic situation and you have to remove yourself. And that's not what you're asking. Put that out there. No, if you're uncomfortable or just not happy with, right? So, you know, for me, I remove myself from the scenario when, you know, when possible, but also when I was in community with said person or group of people, I started taking it from a place of curiosity. I'm like, it's so interesting. I wonder why that's happening, or I wonder what their perspective is. I want, you know, so then the other thing, I never would speak up. I would probably be texting someone else in the room, like, what an idiot, right? Well, now, you know, sometimes I don't bring my perspective in the conversation, especially if not asked. But if it makes sense, where I'm going to speak what I see, which is different from what other people are saying or how they're being, I just deliver it very concisely and lovingly, and then I just shush and move on with my day. And that happened 2 weeks ago. I was at a dinner and somebody had a very strong opinion that I did not have. I listened. I was very uncomfortable, but I sat. And then I was asked, and I didn't attack.
Yeah.
I wanted to, but I didn't. I concisely shared how I saw it, but I said, I appreciate you sharing your perspective. Do you know, when we left that meal, I got a big hug, a big thank you for listening.
Oh, wow.
And I heard what you said, and you've given me some things to think about. So the reason for sharing that story is when you find yourself at work or in your, even in your family, right? Yeah. You know, if you've been with family for a while, we all know it's a cycle, right? So if it's in one of those downward slopes, it's just being and sitting in the discomfort. Then on the flip side of that, it was really important to me because I was kind of out on my own trying to find answers and could not find community. I could not find like-minded. And I was so sad. I'm like, I'm insane. Like I can't connect with anyone. No one is on the same wavelength with me and no one can like hold space with me to help me understand this. I found my community globally. But by sitting in the discomfort, and all of a sudden this little peak, opened up, and I was like, whoa. And I had the space to be able to accept the mission and check out, connect with this one person who then introduced me to another person who said, you know what, you might enjoy reading X or talking to, whatever. Yeah. So I think, we have the blessing of this virtual space is you can seek out people, who you can find commonality with and spend some time learning and growing there. And it takes the pressure off the other situation because now you're getting some, I don't know, hope or inspiration outside, and it takes the pressure off the joy, from that person that you're not getting along with.
Now that's a beautiful thing too. And something that I want to mention too is not this summer. So a year ago, I did an online summit and I interviewed, I don't know, like 50, 60 people for it. And well, one of the things is that I had gone to the TV taping of The World's Greatest Motivators and seen some of my absolute all-time favorite speakers. And I've got to tell you, like, I reached out to them for my summit and half of them said yes. So you just never know. Don't be afraid of, like they're too famous or they're too, well known, they're too whatever you're too whatever is that they might not, you never know who's going to respond and who might become your new friend. So
that's beautiful. And when you are in community around someone that's, helping you find, joy or find that answer that within, it could be that partner, that virtual. So in that global community, there was only like 15 people in it because that's how we were outliers. And, then I was showing up and I was so sad and I didn't really have a lot to say. And finally, like 8 months in, we were in breakout and I said, I'm so sorry that I just show up every month and I'm just like this blob. I'm so lost and I'm so sad. And the gentleman who had invited me in was in my breakout and he said, Kristen, that's what this community is for. It's for us to embrace our discomfort and help one another. I think you should have a one-on-one with the other woman that was in our breakout. And she graciously accepted. And let me tell you something. That one-on-one with Dr. Holly Woods completely changed the trajectory of my life. And she just generously said she would connect with me for an hour. So why I share that is it might not be the person who you're able to access, but you may find like-minded people in community that can support your getting in touch with who you are.
Now that's a beautiful point too, because you just never know. And sometimes you have to let go of those people that you can let go of and have nobody there, like in your physical space.
So how do you do that?
It's just, for me, what I did, because this is my experience, and it was not easy. I had to sit in the discomfort of not having friends. I just had to sit there because I changed my entire lifestyle, for example, and, I was no longer sitting in a bar drinking. So I had to but my taste had changed. And so I couldn't grow and still be in the same spot. So
that's the hardest.
So I had to let go of those people and I just didn't communicate. I mean, I might talk to them every once in a while, but they're not a part of my life anymore. So, it was a season that's no longer there. The season is past.
A chapter that had its purpose and it was beautiful, whether it was a decade, an hour, whatever it was. And then I released them with love.
Exactly.
Right. And thank you for the shared experience. And then you already said this earlier, you're making space. Then all of a sudden something pops up and you have room for, and you're like, oh my gosh. So you're just attracting different experiences because you're not sitting at a bar every night, having a cocktail. Instead, you have the space to then connect with someone that's more in alignment.
Exactly. I love that. So something that you said really quickly, because I want to touch on this one more time before we go, but you said something about you downloaded, and I just thought that I love that term. And I would love for you to explain that to the audience because I know what you mean, but I would love for you
Well, as we've said multiple times tonight, and this was a really weird concept in the beginning. I'm like, that makes no sense to me. It can't be that simple. The answers that we're searching for are already inside of us. We have the answers. We can be inspired to connect with those answers in community or in relationship with someone else. But that optimal joy that we're searching for is not outside of us. So when I sat with self and I would take some deep breaths and I'm like, okay, what do we got? What is out there? And in the beginning, that's awkward. I did that before you and I connected. I took a bunch of deep breaths and I just said, hey, I want to be a conduit for whatever it is that can serve this community and obviously, serve me as well. I want to grow from this conversation, which I have. So I just love the download of I'm going to create the space so that my inner knowing, my intuition, my gut, the three brains. And a lot of us spend almost our whole life up here.
That one. Yep.
Right. And my heart was tucked away and closed. So that one wasn't doing much of anything. And my gut, I totally got away from following my instinct because I was trying to fit into corporate America. Yeah. And I've worked really hard to have those three align and be open and free. And now when I sit and be, period, I have these ahas and I laugh because half the time they don't make sense when I have them, but then I grow into them. And my book was that. It was the downloading of these that's so interesting. There's this story I just remembered. Let me, type it out. And then when I looked back, they did make beautiful, rhythm to share a story of how I finally connected to self.
I think that that's a beautiful thing to say too, that you grew into it because, it's kind of like reading a book, you can read it again. All of a sudden you have this whole new understanding where, it didn't really make sense the first time you read it, but then it's like, oh my gosh, this is gold. This is absolute gold. So
100%.
Yeah. I love that you talk about that because, people don't realize that they can do that within themselves. So, it doesn't even have to be like reading a book. It could be with you.
Well, and it's funny because it's like, sometimes I'll have this sentence that comes up, find it within yourself when that happened. And I was like, what does that even mean? That's weird. Download it, write it down, whatever. And then it would kind of resonate again. And it was, then I Google searched. I'm like, oh my gosh, no one bought that domain name. Let me, and then you look back and you're like, when did I not see this? Because now it's so obvious. So I share that with community that if you have an intuition, an inkling, a thought, don't dismiss it. Just be curious about it. Be like, I have no idea what that means, but I'm that's funny. That's interesting. Yeah. And then just see if it shows up again and again. And I'm pretty sure it will.
I love that. We're almost out of time. Can you believe it? But I just I want to mention again your website as well, so they can pick up your book either there or on Amazon. And also there's a discount in the chat. But I would love for you to leave the audience with any last thoughts or feelings. And even if you want to reiterate something you've already said, that would be fabulous.
Oh, thank you. I'd love to reiterate that I'm here to support, the inspiration of awakening. The answers that we're all looking for are already within inside of us. And all we have to do is be in this present moment and love who we are first and foremost, be comfortable with that. Then we show up in community and we are just attracting opportunities to live that purposeful life once we've done that healing work. And we all have healing work to do. So if I could be of service, I'm happy to. Really, my whole share is about stirring that curiosity inside of you so that you can assimilate, how is this relevant to my walk? And if I could be of any support, link in with me, Facebook with me. You have a great mentor, coach and guide in Julianne. And it's just been an honor to spend this time with you.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Kristen. I would love to have you back because I feel like we barely scratched the surface. And you and I speak the same language. So I'm like, I could talk to you for hours on end.
Right back at you.
Well, thank you again for being on the show. I really appreciate you being here today, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
I hate to say it, but it is the end of the show, and we do have to say goodbye. So everyone who's been watching live, thank you again. And everybody who's watching later. Of course, we appreciate you as well. So we'll see you soon on Thursday. Have a great week, everyone.